Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the RAW Barbell Club podcast. In this episode, I sit down with my friend Steve Norman and we talk about concurrent training for the SuperTotal competitions. So training for the Snatch, Clean and Jerk, Squat, Bench, Deadlift, while also training for things like CrossFit, which a lot of people tend to have to do. I'd like to start off this episode by first thanking Steve for making it out. He does have to leave halfway through the episode, but he gets some good points through and definitely keeps me on my toes about my facts, and that's what I love about him. And that's the reason why he now is coaching here at RAW Barbell Club as well. So if you want to meet Steve and get coached by him, come into RAW. Guys, if you like this episode, please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Please share it with your friends. And if you want to support the podcast, making this podcast is amazing. It's so much fun, but it does cost us a lot of money, from things like bandwidth fees to hosting costs and all of the in-between. If every single person donated the price of a coffee, we'd have enough money to keep this podcast going for another 3 months. Thank you so much to every single person that has already donated. And thank you to you guys that are donating today because you love this episode. Guys, we're looking at booking in some new workshop dates for the new year for our Snatch and Clean Jerk workshop. So if you're anywhere in Australia or around the world and want to have us out to teach some weightlifting, please reach out because we're doing that and we're having a blast doing it. And yeah. Guys, without further ado, welcome to the RAW Barbell Club podcast. So you still here? Yeah. Excellent. Have you finished? Pardon? Have you finished your hollows? Yeah. You don't seem convincing.
I did my sets of hollows. They weren't super long.
All good.
Do you not like hollows?
I'm just bad at them.
Why?
Because she's
My calls
long?
Yeah. Bend your knees.
That was with my knees bent.
Don't hold your arms up. Do you hold your arms up?
Yeah.
Yeah, don't hold your arms up. But straighten your legs.
She's getting a lot better at them.
I could hold them longer than when we first started.
That's true.
Do you do rocks or do you just do holds?
I never do rocks.
Never do rocks. Why?
I just don't think people
Need
are
to?
ready for them.
Okay, fair enough.
I think it's like an advanced variation that most people can't do well.
Most people can't do properly.
Yeah.
For sure. I agree with that.
Damn, that was a good question for the podcast.
Yeah. Why do you not do hollow rocks?
Well, I just don't think many people do them well.
They're
Or
too
proper.
advanced, the movement.
Too advanced the movement. What do you think?
I think that they are definitely overused in like CrossFit, for example, because most people can't do them properly. And to get someone to maintain proper position, you need to scale it back a long way to the point where you may as well just be trying to get them to hold a hollow.
What do you think a perfect hollow position is? Like, can you describe that in a podcast? Would you have to show me?
It is a posterior pelvic tilt that results in a neutralizing of the lumbar's natural curve.
So it's not lumbar flexion, it's...
I don't think it shouldn't really become proper lumbar flexion. There is a little bit of lumbar flexion, but it's not like you're not rounding over like you do in a Jefferson curl. Like you're coming from that natural curve towards the anterior of the lumbar spine and trying to make that more neutral. And because the thoracic already has a natural posterior curve going the other way, you're almost just bringing the lumbar in line with that by using a posterior pelvic tilt.
Yeah.
Because when you posteriorly pelvic tilt, you naturally come into a kyphosis. No, kyphosis is shoulders.
No, you can have a kyphotic spine.
Yeah, a kyphotic spine in the lumbar.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And what happens up top then with the shoulders, with the feet? Like, what are the purposes of those in the hollow?
Where should they be?
Where should they be? Why should they be?
Good question. I'd have to think it through.
Because I have my thoughts.
Do you?
Yeah. And so, see you, Alex. Have a great day.
By hollowing it, when you hollow out and you get that kyphotic lumbar, posterior pelvic tilt, you are maintaining limb positions in the joints while under load. So by lifting your legs, you're forcing an increased lever that you need to actually be able to maintain against. That's why we can, I think a really good step towards a hollow hold is just doing like a seated pelvic tilt, just to teach someone what it is like to actually get that posterior pelvic tilt.
Yep.
And then by getting them to lie on the ground, you add a degree of difficulty. By getting them to lift their shoulders while they do it, you increase the lever length or you increase the moment arm that they need to be able to hold. Yeah, and then by lifting the legs, you do the same thing. That's why you scale it back you can scale a hollow hold by getting someone to bend their knees in, because then their feet aren't as far away from the body.
Yeah.
And the distance, is it a moment arm? Yeah, it is a moment arm. The moment arm is shorter.
Yeah.
So it doesn't require as much force or control strength to be able to hold that position.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What are your thoughts?
Very similar. I mean, for regression and progression of a hollow, definitely like the easiest way to, like the most simple form of a hollow hold would be someone like in a deep squat, feet together, holding into a ball.
Like fetal position.
Yeah, fetal position. And then like doing that on your back or on your side would be very easy. And then as you open up and get longer and longer, that makes it more difficult. The really cool thing about the arms and legs is not only is it about increasing those moment arms, or moment legs. You laughed at that one.
I laughed at it because it was very bad.
But it's also teaching them how to disassociate their bracing strategies away from their midline. A lot of people will use musculature and areas of their body that they shouldn't use to brace their midline or to move their midline. You know, the hip flexors often get involved.
Yeah, the lats.
The lats often get involved.
Yeah.
And those are things that, you know, we can teach away from.
Yeah.
Because they are inefficient strategies. Especially when it comes down to like the reason that you practice a hollow hold is for transfer of movement.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, so like a hollow hold translates really well to the hollow positions you would get to in gymnastics movements. But it also teaches you how to brace well for things like high repetition squats or movements like that. And in those cases, if you're gripping through your lats and your hip flexors, you're not going to be moving well anyway.
Yep.
I'm not saying that those things don't have their place in lifting heavy weights, but that shouldn't be your only strategy.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, no, yeah, 100%. So you're saying that by putting yourself in, for example, by raising the arms above your head in a hollow hold, you are lengthening out the lats and making it very difficult for someone to try and use the lats to brace their thoracic and then into their lumbar.
Oh, no, like people will probably be able to do it. I've seen people able to use their lats in all sorts of positions.
Yeah.
But I'm saying it's a potential way of training them out of that habit.
Out of that habit. Yeah. Okay.
That's all I have to say about that.
I feel like that ate up time for someone for talking about a hollow hold.
Yeah, but I think hollow holds are super complex, and I think a lot of people don't spend the requisite amount of time teaching or managing people's ability to do them.
Is it used much in weightlifting?
I don't know if other people do. I use hollow holds with a lot of people. I like them over planks or any of the static. Well, first off, I'm not a big proponent of flexion-based like abdo exercises. I'd rather people do mainly static things, just because we do so much movement anyway.
And also, the midline and the core is designed to hold isometrically, right, and hold statically.
Yeah.
It's there supposed to be a stabilizing muscle for movement happening away from the midline, not supposed to be, it's not designed to be a flexion extension muscle. Yeah, that's why like there's a lot of research in like the different types of muscle fibers, the difference between the muscle fibers in the abdominals versus say the quads, being that they react much better to strengthening via isometric movement than other movement, because their day-to-day activity has always been designed to keep you upright statically.
Yeah.
So it's always holding an isometric contraction to hold you up. So as far as like people do it just because to get breakdown of muscle tissue and like increase size, like you need to do some sort of isotonic movement as well. That's why like bodybuilders and stuff do it, to try and increase abdominal size and tonnage.
Yeah.
But as far as activities of daily living and making someone more functional, there's almost, unless you're doing it for a mobility reason through the spine, there's almost no reason to train flexion, at least.
Yeah.
I think there's some reason to train extension, because you can sometimes end up flexed via gravity and then need to extend in life, but very rarely are you having to flex against a resistance in life.
So you asked me the other day about like anti-rotation stuff.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any benefit? You say there's not much benefit in doing flexion stuff. Is there benefit to doing rotational stuff? Or is that the same scenario? Like you're better off just doing anti-rotation stuff? And maybe just give people an example of what that is.
Yeah.
If they don't understand.
So a rotational exercise would be like
A wood chop.
a wood chop, yeah, like cable rotations, like oblique twists and that sort of thing.
Or Russian twist.
Russian twist, something like that. Anything where the idea of the movement is that you're trying to rotate the trunk left and right, or left or right, while maintaining a fairly static lower body as well, is generally the rule. Like the hips generally shouldn't move too much, and you should be moving up from above the hip around. And then an anti-rotation exercise is putting yourself in a position where there is a force that wants to pull you that way, and you're holding static instead.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a good example of like an anti-rotation exercise would be like a pull-off press. That's actually, I know you're not a huge fan of pull-off press. I think you said to me it's a fancy way of doing nothing. I like the pull-off press.
I never said
yes,
that.
Yes, you did. I like the pull-off press to teach someone what it feels like to do anti-rotation work. But then
I actually really like the pull-off press.
Do you?
Yeah.
No, you didn't say that last time.
I go through phases of, and sometimes I just say things to get a rise out of you.
Yeah, well, I didn't disagree. But then like another good anti-rotation exercise might be like
A single arm walk or something.
a single arm walk, yeah, like a suitcase carry, or even good anti-rotation stuff is like single-legged Romanian deadlifts and that sort of thing, holding a load, fighting that rotation. The only problem with doing those sorts of things is you tend to anchor a lot more from like the glute rather than anything in the abdominal, in the trunk section. Like, yeah.
But see, like I would argue that that's a good thing, teaching
Someone to use the glutes
Well,
instead.
it's teaching like a firing pattern that is beneficial. And
yeah.
I think that's what a pull-off press is really good at doing.
Yeah.
Teaching someone how to, like, for example, if the band is pulling you to the right, then and you're pulling and you're just going straight up, then you're gonna push through the right glute.
Yeah. To
And then
anchor you.
use that left oblique to hold you straight. And if you're doing that well, then you're gonna feel it. Like if your glutes don't burn on pull-off presses, you're probably not doing them well.
Left internal or left external oblique, Andy?
Internal and external will be working.
No. Internal is ipsilateral and external is contralateral.
External.
No, internal on the left side, external on the right side.
Yes.
If it's
Okay.
pulling you to the right.
Very well. I hate you. You're making me think of my podcast. You jerk.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the only way I ever remember that was ipsi and internal both start with I.
That's a very clever way of thinking about it. Do you think about that stuff much, or do you just think about the movement? I often don't think about the musculature.
Depends on why I'm programming something. Injury rehabilitation.
Yeah.
Definitely thinking about the musculature. General preparedness. Generally just thinking about the movement. And it depends how deep you want to go as well. Like depending on the phase of training that someone's in. Like I say, it might just be a very general preparatory phase, in which case you're probably just thinking about movement as a whole. And then as you start to get slightly more specific, you might be thinking, okay, we're trying to really up the squat in particular at this point in time. So what musculature helps you squat heavier, break the squat down a little bit more, and then you can target those muscles through accessory movement rather than other movement. And also just with bad movement patterning, like something that I think I would like to discuss with you is you messaged me the other day asking about like knee position and glute firing.
Yep.
And how people can sometimes blame just the glute for poor position, rather than maybe having a look at whether if the person has ever squatted with good position in the first place.
Like which, it's a chicken or the egg scenario.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is more important, the glutes or the position?
Yeah. And
what did you say?
I said position only because, but the problem with saying position is that if someone were to have really weak glutes, they wouldn't be able to get to position necessarily, or they wouldn't be able to maintain position under load. However, I think training at really low load and forcing position at a weight they can handle will then train glute without necessarily having to focus on it, if that makes sense. Like plenty of people that I've seen that can squat huge weight but have serious knee valgus.
Yeah.
And probably because they were never taught good position in the first place. So under light load, as they were coming up and getting heavier, they always had that knee valgus, and no one ever took it back and said, hey, we need to make sure your knees are tracking and stacked properly over the tops of your ankles. And then that is now why they've got that issue. Because there's a lot of people that have really strong glutes that still have those issues, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I have that issue. On a really heavy load, my knees will track inwards. It doesn't happen on light weights.
Yet you can good morning almost what you squat.
Yeah, maybe not exactly what I squat, but it's pretty close.
Yeah. So your glutes obviously aren't weak, is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Yeah, because I mean, you've obviously got a very strong back. That's why your deadlift and your good morning is so strong, and why you used to squat so back dominant.
Still.
Like so much of a lean forward. But to say that you are able to good morning that much weight by extending your lumbar spine is a bit ridiculous. Like you've obviously got the glute strength to extend the hip as well. So it's odd to think that you are not able to control that knee valgus under load.
Yeah.
In saying that, it's different portions of the glute as well that's doing the work. Like glute max is extending the hip, but then glute min, glute med is more controlling what's happening at the femur.
Yeah. That's pushing your knees out already.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, out, not in.
Out, yeah.
I think the reason I messaged you that question was because I just see online so many people doing all these glute accessory work that their coaches, PTs, sometimes physios and whatnot give them. And I don't see a lot of progression or like reasoning behind it. Like I have no problem with someone doing like monster walks or X walks or whatever, glute bridges, clams, everything, as long as there is some sort of remedial use to it. Like it's that, and then we go into the squats and see if we can change the movement pattern. And I think it should always start with the movement pattern first, and then you figure out how to make that movement pattern better by adding on
movements on top.
So like, all right, your knees keep tracking in. Let's try this quickly to prime you before you do the squat. And if that works, then awesome. If it doesn't, we need to figure out a different way of attacking that situation.
Yeah, and that's something that I've had a bit of an issue with in the past is people who do like your activation work before you start, and say you're doing your activation work for your glutes. The problem is that I've seen a few times is that people get really, really good at turning their glutes on and using their glutes in the movement that their physio or their PT has taken them aside and spent 10 minutes teaching them to use their glutes properly.
Yeah.
But that doesn't, and this is exactly what you're saying, automatically translate to them being able to use it in a different movement,
Yes.
in the bigger movement. So just because they can use their glutes to abduct the leg in a side-lying position in a clam, doesn't mean that they're going to be able to externally rotate while squatting.
100%.
Because you've spent the time to show them, teach them what it feels like to do the clam, but you haven't spent the time teaching them in the squat.
Yeah. But they might not be able to control it in the squat yet.
No, maybe not, but to say like, yeah, okay, you're awesome at it at clams, let's get into the squat, holy shit, why isn't it working?
Yeah, they're missing some
There's some
meaningful
steps in there,
between.
yeah.
I get that. And that's an important thing for a lot of physios that don't have a background in strength training. A lot of them don't have a good exercise progression knowledge. And that's something that as a physio you need to get better at. And that's why Kush had such an advantage. Like, she comes from a strength training background, and that's something that she's finding is a huge strength for her in her field.
Yeah.
But there needs to be some sort of, just like the hollows, a progression and regression. So clams are your regression because you're laying on your side. It's quite easy to do. And you go from that, and then you go to like a level 2 clam where, you know, your feet aren't touching anymore. So you've got a floating leg and it's moving out and in. Then
Add a band.
you know, oh, well, I wouldn't even add a band yet. Maybe we add some hip flexion
Yep.
to it. So now we're kind of mimicking.
Sorry.
Do you want tissue?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Now we're kind of mimicking that squat. Then we go onto our backs, and now we're doing some glute bridges. Then we do some single leg glute bridges where we're again adding that hip flexion in and seeing if we can keep that
Knee.
you know, abduction, adduction, you know, at bay. Then we start, you know, progressing to monster push outs or whatever.
Yeah.
But there needs to be a progression to the squat, and
Yep.
that needs to be your end goal, and they need to be able to control at each level.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah. Should clarify as well that while we're talking about physios who don't have a strength background, our anatomy knowledge is nowhere near a physio's either.
Yeah, I didn't know what ipsilateral.
Yeah. So talking from experience in a gym, not necessarily from...
Yeah, I'm not bagging on physios.
Yeah,
My
no.
best friend is a physio.
Who's your best friend?
Sorry, my
'Cause I'm
second
not a
best
physio.
friend.
There you go. Yeah.
But no, I just meant that, like, I see, as a strength coach, you come into contact with a lot of people that have seen physiotherapists, chiropractors, homeopaths, osteopaths, all of that. And I guess the problem is we get the second-hand word. So the athlete tells us what they have said and what they've given you.
Chinese whispers.
Yeah, and you kind of go, is that what they said or is that what you heard?
Yeah.
And, you know, we have to make up our own mind of like, okay, how do we integrate this into the system of our training?
Yes.
And that I guess that's the problem. But also sometimes I do think that health professionals can be a little bit frugal with their information and what they tell athletes to do and not do.
I've also gotten the shits previously with, and it's only because we're not working at I guess, a super elite level where there's funding involved and there's money being thrown around. But it's very hard to communicate with a professional about an issue that's happening with an athlete. So you're always getting secondhand, and it's very hard, unless it's someone that you know and you've recommended, it's very hard to get their physio or their chiro or their whatever on the phone to talk to them about what the issue is. Because Joe Blow that comes into the gym doesn't understand the fact that his glute isn't firing properly to stop adduction during hip flexion movements.
Yes.
Like, he doesn't understand that, so to come in and then explain that to you, he's missing steps, he's missing information. You need to be able to get on the phone to someone who speaks the same language as you and then talk about it with them. Whereas that can be quite hard when you're dealing, when every Joe Blow's got their own physio that they use, and you don't have a network, you don't have that network built with those people.
Yeah, 100%. And I implore any athlete that needs help from a physio to put them in contact with your coach.
Yeah, 100%.
Or trainer, because if we can have like a 10-minute conversation or even a 5-minute conversation, it clears the air up like this.
Yeah, 100%.
Like straight away, because all we need is a game plan.
Yeah.
That's all I need. Like one of the best rehabilitative situations we had was Naomi's ACL. She had a game plan from her physiotherapist that I could just look at and be like, okay, we're on the right track. This is what he wants out of her. He wants like this amount of range. He wants this level of strength. We're going to work to that. And then when she goes and sees him, he's impressed. He's going to progress her. And then we can, keep working until his influence has gone from like this high to low, and my influence has gone from low to high. And that's how it needs to be.
Yeah. That's why I think there's a large benefit to having a physio in your gym. Like,
so much. When Kush was here, like, adherence was really high to rehab, which is a big issue with most athletes.
Yeah, all athletes.
Yeah.
Yeah, except one's being paid good money.
Sorry?
Even one's being paid good money. Yeah.
It does make a big difference.
Yeah, sure. I got time, it's okay.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
What is the time?
About 10 to.
Oh, okay. What time do you have to be out of here?
As long as we finish up here, if you don't mind me running straight out the door, we'll finish here at least 10 past at latest.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, cool.
I just wanted to do this because I
Needed one?
needed one.
Yeah, fair enough.
Well, that's enough about rehab.
I feel like we didn't talk about rehab.
Oh, well, that's enough about
We
bagging
just talked
on.
about how much you hate physios.
I don't hate physios. I love physios.
Yeah, maybe don't fade off as you as you clarify that.
No, I love physios. What I don't like is I just see a bunch of people doing rehab on the interwebs or in real life or prescribing it without any causal link between that and their
Issue.
Fair enough. The movement comes first. And that's all I have to say about that.
Fair. Yeah, movement should come first. Movement's what you do in every day.
So I had a question a while back from a listener. So I'll shout him out, Andrew Davies. He asked about training for SuperTotal and how difficult that is, how you would set that out, and then also if he is doing CrossFit, how to do all of those things together. And it's quite a difficult task.
Yeah.
As a CrossFitter, as someone who does, as a CrossFitter, you wear a lot of hats, right?
Yes.
There are at least 7 domains that you need to be good at.
Are you talking about the 7 components of fitness?
Yeah, what are they?
Oh, shit. I can't rattle it off. Flexibility, strength, speed, fitness. I can't remember them. Like, how long has it been? I think it was year 10 PE that I went through the 7 components of fitness.
It's alright, you don't need to.
I can't remember them because I don't know whether it's like, is aerobic capacity and then anaerobic capacity 2 separate ones?
No
I can't
idea.
remember.
You just have to you have to wear a lot of hats. You got to be good at weightlifting, you got to be, semi-strong, and then you've got to be able to do stuff quickly, do stuff slowly, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
So that in our field is called concurrent training.
Yep.
Being able to train different capacities at the same time.
Yep.
I think I'll just go through quickly how I look at training weightlifters, powerlifters, and fitness dudes, and then I'll get you to add your thoughts.
Go for it.
All right. So in weightlifting, we have 2 competitive exercises or movements: the snatch and the clean and jerk. To train them, there's a high level of skill involved, which means that you have to have regular contact time with those movements. The weights that you do that at do not have to be high. We know that if you just practice those things at light weights, you will eventually be able to do them at heavy weights when the time comes. The most important thing is that technique and movement is at an acceptable level. So when you load, that it's still good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, in terms of strength training for weightlifting, there's a couple of things that you just need to take into account. Mainly, we're looking at the concentric phase of a squat. So we're looking at making those legs push upwards, right? When we look at the midline, we're looking at dissipating the load. So as we pull or as we squat or as we jerk or whatever movement you're doing, we're training a certain level of stability through those movements. So that's how we train that. And then lastly, the upper body, we're mainly working on isometric and eccentric strength. We don't have to be a strong presser to be a good Olympic lifter. All you have to do is be a strong catcher, right? So you need to be able to catch weights overhead in a very stacked and sound position. So if we simplify that to its basis, you're doing squats with potentially a bounce, you're doing midline core accessories, so things like holds, holds, back extensions, maybe a couple of pulls here and there, and then with the overhead stuff, mainly things like overhead squats, jerks, maybe some push presses if you're really, really weak, but you're gonna leave things like strict press and stuff on the table because you don't need them as much if we're simplifying things, all right? Now, if we layer onto that things like the powerlifts.
Do you agree with that? Do you think that you can leave something like strict press on the table?
I think you can. Do I think you should is a different story.
How much do you think that being able to press out of that front rack position is important for shoulder health?
For shoulder health, actually, I don't think it's that important. I think you can strict press a baseline level, like 50% of your body weight, and be able to jerk big weights still.
Okay.
I think I would rather be able to strict press my body weight or more, but I'm just trying to
simplify it as much as you can.
Because we have too many things to work on in this scenario.
Two.
Right, two. Snatch question.
Yeah.
But I mean, like when I start layering on,
I know, I'm taking the piss. Yeah.
squats, if we look at the power lifts, the competitive lifts are squats, bench, deadlift. With the squats, we're now developing a higher load. Potentially, we're low bar squatting. Now we need a high level of eccentric strength. So we've gone from just that concentric only phase to adding that eccentric in as well in terms of training, because that is going to be a little bit slower because we're moving absolute weights now. We're not trying to move weights easily. We're trying to move heavy weights. Right? And because we've done that, that's going to add a certain level of load and fatigue. Whereas before, with a weightlifting style squat, you can weightlifting style squat like pretty often. But if you start doing this powerlifting style squat, it's going to get quite tough. With our midline, we're now having to, again, pull heavy weights. So we've gone from having to work on just having that static strength through our midline to actually being, to actually like pulling off the ground quite heavy, which means that we've got to start adding that concentric phase into there as well. And then with the pressing,
are you talking about through the midline?
Through the midline, as in like through the glutes and like the distal and proximal ends of your midline, right? And then with the pressing, now we're adding that concentric in as well because we have to actually start training the presses, bench press in particular. Again, you could probably argue that strict press can be left on the table, but now because we're trying to keep that shoulder joint healthy, because you're doing jerks and bench press, you probably should be adding some strict presses in there. All right? And that's how I look at strength training for SuperTotal. Now to add fitness in there.
How much posterior pulling do you need, like upper body, like rowing and that sort of thing, purely from either from a stability point of view for the overhead position, for retraction during bench press as well, and for shoulder health as well.
I think those things are super important,
Yeah.
but you can focus on them through the next bit of it. So like that's what I would add into their aerobic capacity
Okay.
if they're trying to do everything at once.
So you wouldn't have someone rowing for strength?
No, they would be rowing for strength, but I would add those into like a Metcon or something, like ring rows or
Okay.
pull-ups. Even though I'm almost 100% sure I've said to you on this podcast, never do ring rows in a Metcon. Or like some sort of gymnastics training.
Yeah.
Actually, no, I think they do need to do pull-ups and rows in their strength training.
Do you think there's any benefit to maximally loading rows and pull-ups and stuff?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Like, would you ever do a 1RM prone row, for example?
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's very beneficial if you're just looking at it as a shoulder health. No, there is no benefit
To doing a 1RM prone row?
No. Because what we're trying to do with these rows, we're trying to add stability for the competitive lifts.
Yep. But do you believe that if they are overall absolute strength is weak through those pulling muscles,
Yeah.
those rowing muscles, that even from a shoulder health point of view, the fact that your pressing muscles are so strong is going to cause that kyphotic curve?
Again, the movement comes before the prescription or exercise. Because what you're adding into that is like a row for no reason, like a heavy row for no reason. Like their posture and the way they press or their pain or discomfort should dictate the programming.
But shouldn't you be trying to preempt those things rather than waiting for it to be an issue?
Yeah, but like you could achieve the same thing with a 5 or an 8.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
I don't think you need to do a 1 or even a 3.
Yeah.
Does that kind of
Yeah.
answer that question?
Yeah. Do you need to do any percentage-based work with?
With rows?
Rowing
Like,
movements?
do you think rows, do you think your push should be a percentage of your pull? Is that what you're getting at?
No, I don't think there's an exact number. I think you're right in saying that it's movement-based. It needs to be movement-based. But I guess
the guys that James Newbury used to work with, they used to always put up these weird ratios.
Yeah.
Like
you had a thing for those for a little while though.
I did go through a phase of that, and then
Yeah.
I realized it was silly.
I guess more what I'm saying is so that if you are programming for an athlete that maybe struggles with adherence, for example, you can give someone a percentage-based piece for their rowing movement. So you can say, I want you to prone row 4 sets of 8 reps at 60%
Of their prone row or of their bench?
of their prone row.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, do you think there's a benefit to having that number there? Or would you ever bother getting that number? If you would you get that number using like an estimated max of a 5RM, for example? Or do you just not care and want, as long as people are doing 4 sets of 8, the load is less important?
No, I understand where you're getting at, because what you end up with is someone doing 4 sets of 8 with 40 kilos,
When they could row 65 kilos.
70 kilos or
Yeah.
80 kilos, and then benching like 150.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there is a huge benefit to having percentage-based rows, or at least having a coach's eye or the athlete understand
Yeah.
that rowing heavy is important.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're 100% right.
Do you think from a functionality point of view, there's really any point in ever doing prone rows? Like a supported row?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like prone rows.
Yep.
I think it's really, like, once you take out the core musculature and the legs out of it, it makes it really hard to row.
Yeah, 100%. But do you think that because everything that you do in life, or from a competitive sense in those
supported.
movements, is not supported?
Yeah.
Like, it's self-supported, right, from your own static holds throughout the trunk and the legs.
Yeah.
Is there any point in taking all that out of it just to focus on the musculature?
Yeah, it could be diagnostic.
Yep.
could really show you something. You know how we talked about someone that's not able to disassociate their lats or hip flexors from their midline? Same thing.
Other way around.
Other way around.
Yeah.
Like, what if they can't stop gripping through their midline?
Yeah.
Or they can't stop using their glutes?
Yeah.
You know, you could have people that do things the opposite way.
Yep.
And that's a good way of teaching them not to. Or if you have someone that's like super trappy and you just want to lower the weight so that they can, you know, actually
Speaking
use
of
their
super
rhomboids
trappy.
or lats, or are you super trappy?
I'm super trappy sitting here now.
Oh, really? Do you want to stand up instead?
No.
Do a standing podcast.
We need a very desk. Anyway, fitness dudes. Go.
Yeah, and then layering on the fitness on top is the hard bit, because you have all this time that you need to be spending on snatches and clean and jerks, squats, benches, and deadlifts, and we don't want to have to do them in an aerobic way, because then we're not getting the technical component of training them. It's very difficult to do that, unless you're proficient already. If you're highly proficient in those movements, then you might be able to add them into Metcons. You might be able to do, if you're less proficient, then we go into things like EMOMs, or every 2 minutes, because you still get a fitness, you're still getting some sort of fitness from doing those in that way. And then if you're least proficient, you have to do them completely separate, and then get your accessory work in through the Metcons. So sled pushes for legs, air squats, wall balls, those sort of things, lunges, those movements. For your bench accessories, things like push-ups, ring rows, pull-ups, all of that, and then everything else in between, all the other CrossFit movements, just to add those in. So that's the baseline for the structure of like how you think about things, but the actual prescription has to happen over like a 12-week period. What do you think about what I've said so far?
Good, really good. I agree. Yeah, I know. I'm looking at the time as well. I'll try and be quick.
You can go and I'll finish off.
No, okay. I agree with what you've said about what's important, what's not important. I think something that needs to be thought about that maybe you've skipped over for CrossFit, if he's adding that in, and also just general well-being. And this is something that I've looked a lot at recently, just out of interest, is energy, make sure you're focusing on energy systems as well. So not necessarily just, so I think most of your like really short bursts are pretty well covered just in general training, like your type 2B fibers, so like your super fast twitch fibers, and your glycolytic, anaerobic glycolytic, yeah. So your fastest energy system, like your 10-second energy system, is pretty well covered via just doing weightlifting. And then you have like your lactic acid system, which you need to approach somehow as well. And then you have an aerobic system, which you need to approach somehow as well. 2 and 3 interlink quite well, being that, yes, they're separate systems. In one is anaerobic and one is aerobic. Anaerobic being doesn't require oxygen for the use of energy, for the production of energy, and aerobic being uses an oxidative breakdown of substrates to derive more energy. Yeah, they're quite closely related because you can have both happening at the same time. It's very hard to have an aerobic system in play while you're using an ATP system, like an ATP PC, which is your adenosine triphosphate phosphocreatine system, which is your first system, your quick, fast release. It's using purely stored energy.
Basically anything under 10 seconds.
Anything under 10 seconds, most people less. Yeah, Usain Bolt would be in that system his whole 100 meter. He would be out of it in the back end of his 200. Just. There's very little, if any, anaerobic activity taking place while this is happening. It's too short. It's only using stored energy. The body doesn't give a shit at this point about making more energy. It's only using stored stuff. So in this function, there's very little actual energy production taking place. Second one. In the second one, lactic acid system, a little bit longer. It's still anaerobic, There's ways of creating more energy during this without the use of oxygen. However, you're very rarely going to be in this system without at least some sort of play from the aerobic system. The aerobic system is going to be happening at
so
some point.
Anywhere from that sort of 10 seconds to
about
3
minutes, yeah. So they're very interrelated, especially in CrossFit, I find, because in CrossFit, I think there are stages in a workout where you're going to move in and out of dominance in those two systems, depending on the movement. Let's say you're doing a couplet of rowing and muscle ups. Okay, every time you get on the pull-up bar, you're probably going to slide back into an anaerobic system. Yeah. There's significantly more fast twitch fibers taking place, being used, which generally, when you fast twitch fibers are what's being used, they're a lot more anaerobic than they are aerobic. And then when you're on the rower, you're probably going to be in a much more aerobic system, which is allowing that anaerobic system to recover for when you get back on the bar muscle ups. So I think you need to think about the different energy systems that are going to be in play during training. As I said, I think you can kind of leave that ATP PC system out of it. Like, I'm not a huge fan of doing, when you're doing something like 10-second airdyne sprints, you're generally looking at that system, but you're more looking at the use of the other systems to recover that system before you get back into your next 10-second sprint. I think as far as fast outlay of energy, you do enough of that just by doing a clean and jerk.
Yeah.
Or doing a deadlift. When training, I think that you can't, so this is where I'm getting at with what you were saying, you can't just look at the using accessory movements and stuff in fitness. There needs to be purely like base building fitness as well, which is you can't put any accessory movements in there because there's too much skill, and it requires too much musculature as well, which means that you're going to slide out of that aerobic system. And I think the aerobic system is super important to have that base there because, as I said, it's important for recovering the other two systems. So the aerobic system is allowing you to build up more stored ATP. It's much slower at doing it, but it's much more effective. It's not more effective, that's probably the wrong word. It's much slower, but it can happen more continuously. Yeah. You can't use that system when going fast.
Yes.
So it's important to think about, from a CrossFit point of view, you still need to do stuff like sitting on a roll for 20 minutes to build that aerobic system up, and then you can go away from it. It's sort of like, a good way, I think, to think about it is to go away from, so if you're thinking about strength training, you might go like hypertrophy training into strength training. It's the same thing, I think, for capacity stuff in fitness. You need to go from aerobic into anaerobic training, and then you can kind of phase out your hypertrophy in the same way that you phase out aerobic training.
Yeah.
Especially coming into something like the open, for example. I kind of lost my train of thought halfway through then.
That's all right. That's something that I can work on to when I tell them about how we're actually going to program the cycle.
Yeah.
How we're going to do that.
Yeah. I just think you need to think about the systems that are in place. So you can't just program, okay, the heart rate's going to get up while doing this accessory work, because you need to think about how high their heart rate's getting and what system that's tapping into, and whether if that is having a play on how well they're going to perform in certain length workouts.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I agree.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean.
Okay.
And I will make
cool.
sure
because that was poorly. I bounced around a lot.
No, but I'm going to explain it better to them.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I got to go anyway.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here, dude.
No worries. Catch you later.
I'll talk to you later. While Steve's packing up, I will start laying out the foundations of what this program looks like. Basically, we are ramping up to a competition, a SuperTotal competition. So at the end of this 12-week cycle that we're about to start off our endeavor in, we're gonna end up on a Saturday or Sunday competing in the snatch, the clean and jerk, the squat, the bench, and deadlift. What this means is that on this last day, this is where we need to be maximally recovered as well as peaked to do our best in all 5 of these lifts. And if we go by Steve's recommendations, that also means that this is the time where we're least needing to be fit, in the sense of being able to do Fran or a Metcon at high intensity, because that is not the most important thing at this time. That being said, what we're going to do is we're going to flip what Steve said in reverse. So rather than starting off this cycle with longer steady state cardio, we're actually going to finish with the longer steady state cardio. So we're going to go from these intense bouts to less intense bouts of fitness. And the reason being, the level of fitness we need to get through the day of SuperTotal is actually going to take us more time. It's going to be longer duration. So we do actually need a certain level of fitness. You do, to be able to do, 3 attempts of the snatch, 3 attempts of the clean and jerk, 3 bench, squat, and deadlift. But we don't need to be able to do, 30 burpees in a minute as fast as possible. You may still have some capacity to do that, but it's not what we're aiming for. So as we layer in our fitness on this program, we're going to start off with really short, sharp bouts of fitness where we are working in that, 10-second range, 20-second range. Then in the middle cycle, so that first 4 weeks, that's what we're working on, those intense bouts. In the middle stage, we're going to be working on doing things that are slightly longer, so that 3 to 10 minutes. And then in the final 4 weeks, we'll be working on that 15, 20, 30 minutes, maybe even up to an hour of really, really simple, easy, low impact, low skill cardio. So I'm talking about walking, I'm talking about rowing, I'm talking about being on a bike, just pushing a sled, but like so easy that our heart rate is not spiking. Now, as we go into the weightlifting movements for this 4-week cycle, we know at the end of this 4-week cycle, the 12-week cycle, that we need to be perfectly in tune with our technique, but also comfortable hitting some decent weights, right? So that final 4-week cycle is where we're going to be peaking, right? It's where the weights are going to start to get heavy. We're going to have a high contact time with things around 85% and above. So that means we're going to hit those weights fairly often, and our technique is going to be sharp. So we're going to be doing a lot of full movements. So that's like the full snatch, the full clean and jerk, and we're going to be going quite heavy. But that also means that because we're hitting those heavy weights, our squat, bench, and deadlifts might not be as heavy. So we'll probably stay between 75 and 85% on those movements, but we're still going to be hitting a bunch of singles and doubles. We're not going to be going full ham on 5s and 6s and stuff like that. If we go to the second stage down, those snatches and clean and jerks might be from the hang. We're going to be working on some technical faults, and we're going to be spending more time on some repetitions, and we're going to do more sets. This is also a good time to start integrating some heavier weights for the squat, bench, and deadlift, just so that we know where we are in the lead up to our final stage. This is where we can pump that pump those high volume, high intensity workouts in the squat, bench, and deadlift, because we have the next 4-week cycle to recover in time for our final competition. And then in the first cycle, this is where it's basically all technique work for the snatch and clean and jerk, where we're attacking really light weights. Maybe we're going from the high hang, we're doing a lot of overhead squats and building foundational movements. And then with the squat, bench, and deadlift, this is where we're doing our hypertrophy work. Sorry, I'm talking a lot, so I'm getting a dry mouth. This is where we do a lot of our hypertrophy work. So this is where we're going to do a lot of high reps in the squat, high reps in the bench, and high reps in the deadlift, as well as those accessory movements. In terms of looking at gymnastic skill, which again is very prevalent, it's something that we do have to practice. This is a good time to spend a lot of time on that in this first cycle, because at the end, we're just going to be doing the bare minimum, because the biggest things we're worried about are the snatch and clean and jerk and squat, bench, deadlift. So between these first 2 cycles is where we can actually do a bunch of muscle up work, a bunch of pull up work, a bunch of toes to bar, handstands, handstand push-ups, and that sort of thing. Whereas later on, we really have to transition to, strict presses, push presses, things that aren't as high repetition or as technically intensive. So I hope that kind of makes sense for how to set up like a SuperTotal program if you are doing CrossFit. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments or message me and add your thoughts. If you're a coach that's listening and you're like, oh, I don't agree with that, like Steve did, that's fine. I really do look forward to you guys telling me your thoughts. And guys, if you like that episode, you can find Steve Norman at SteveNorman250 on Instagram. You can find me at Train with Andy on Instagram. Obviously, you can follow the gym at RAW Barbell Club on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We're on all of those things. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and click that notification bell. That way you will see when the next episode is up. If you want to share this episode, I'd greatly appreciate it, and it will help this podcast grow. Make sure to give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to this. And guys, we're looking at potential dates and places to hold our next snatch and clean and jerk workshops. So if you're interested in having us out to do some teaching or to do some coaching or even lead a coaching workshop for your coaches, reach out to us because we're doing that. And guys, what else? If you're interested in joining our online team, we also have that available. So please feel free to reach out. And if you love this podcast, just like I did, making it is a lot of fun, but it thrives off your donations. So if every single person that listens to this episode donated the price of a coffee, it would really go a long way to keeping this podcast going for another few months. Thank you to every single person that has already donated. And I'm sorry for waffling on so much, but I really appreciate everyone that's listening and donating and looking after us. I honestly couldn't do this without you guys. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye.